Oh, okay, it's now streaming now. Yes, it's connected now.
You say Zoom to YouTube, right?
Yes. Now it started streaming.
Okay. So now I'll give you host.
Okay.
You're now host, so now you can play anything you
Okay.
want.
I'll come back and play while I wait for the matter to come.
Prabhu, Aribo? Krishna?
Yes, Prabhuji.
It's okay now.
Prabhu, you said what?
I said it's okay now. Before there was no sound. Now it's okay.
Okay. Dr. George Amiga, you're welcome. Prima Manjari, you're welcome on the platform.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother, welcome to the platform.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, you're welcome to the Hare Krishna Africa platform.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. You're breaking up.
Yes, you're welcome, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you.
So,
We'll start.
yes,
Last time they were playing Jai Radha Madhava.
yes, I'm going to do that right now, Maharaj.
Oh, shall I play it?
Okay.
I've got harmonium here if you want me to play. For just
I can share, Maharaj.
okay, I'll get the harmonium here. Do you want to? Oh, okay.
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
So I will share the text for today, Maharaj.
Okay.
We have devotees still coming in gradually, just few now. So, but I guess we can start. Then they will join as the class progresses, Maharaj.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 17. Title of the chapter is Contents of the Gita Summarized. Avinashi tu tadvidi, yena sarvam idam tatam, vinasham avyavyasya, na kaschit kartam harati. Avinashi, imperishable, tu, but, tat, that, vidhi, know it, yena, by whom, sarvam, all of the body, idam, this, tatam, pervaded, vinasham, destruction, avyayasya, of the imperishable, asya, of it, na kaschit, no one, kartam, to do, arhati, is able. Translation. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. Usually everybody responds, but I don't think it's maybe so practical. I can give them time anyway. I'll just read and leave a space for them to say, for the devotees. That which pervades the entire body, what's that? You should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. This verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body, in part or a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of the individual soul, and the symptoms of the soul's presence is perceived individual consciousness. This soul is described as an 1/10,000th part tip or the upper portion of the hair point in size. The Shvetashvatar Upanishad 5.9 confirms this. Balagra Shata Bhagasya Shata Da Kalpitasya Cha Bhavo Jiva Savigneya Sa Chanam Yaya Kalpate. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. Similarly, the same version is stated. Keshagra Shatabhagasya Shatama Shaha Sadrish Atmakaha Jiva Shukshman Swarupoyam Yato Hi Chit Kamana. There are innumerable principles of spiritual atoms, innumerable particles of spiritual atoms, which are as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair. Therefore, the individual particle of spirit soul is a spiritual atom, smaller than the material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spirit spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body, as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is the proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.9, the measurement of the atomic spirit soul is further explained. Eshar mur atma chetasa vidat yo yasmin pranaha panchada sambi vesha pranais chitam sarvam utam pragyanam yasmin vishuddhe vibhavat shesha atma. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. The atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. It is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. The soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air. Its effulgence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air encircling the pure soul by different kinds of postures. Not for any material profit, but for the liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures, and it is also actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only the insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading Vishnu Tattva. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. According to the Mandukya Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity. And because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them assert foolishly that there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart along with the super soul, and thus all the energies of the body, bodily movements are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles which carry the oxygen from the lungs gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood-generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot sustain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit whole, are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine, there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. So whether one follows Vedic knowledge or modern science, one cannot deny the existence of the spirit soul in the body. And the science of the soul is explicitly explained in Bhagavad Gita by the personality of Godhead himself. Om Gyan Timirandasya Yanjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Sri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Adamayam Dadati Svar Vedantike. Andeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarvajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Anamami Hari Priya Anjakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Atitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So there are three states of consciousness: Jagra, Jagre, Snapna, and Sushupti. So Jagra is when we're fully awake. Snapna is when we are sleeping and when we dream. And Sushupti is unconsciousness. So sometimes we can experience unconsciousness when we take some, what do you call it, anesthetic. It completely knocks us out. And the next thing we know, we're actually awake again. We didn't understand anything. It's just as if, you know, it was on. Sometimes we wake up and we still think we're waiting to go into the operating theatre. You know, because we've just been completely blanked out. So this is like death, actually. We go so deep that we lose all different kinds of consciousness. Then there's Snapna. This is dreaming state. When we sleep at night, we may go into unconsciousness for some time, but then eventually, as we're waking up, we start to dream. Or if we remain in that snartna position throughout our sleep, we dream. So this is why it says that if we dream a lot, we don't get proper rest, because we're half awake, we're in the mid, but if we're actually deeper in sleep, then the body is not, the mind is not active. And so the body is becoming rejuvenated. And then finally, we wake up. So Srila Prabhupada says in all these three states, actually the soul's existing. Even though we cannot perceive the soul in the unconscious state, it's there by the process of understanding that the body is actually working. When Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when Lord Chaitanya, he visited Jagannath Puri after he took sannyas, and he immediately ran in front of all the other devotees who were with him. It was just after the incident where Lord Nityananda broke his sannyas danda, and so on the plea of being angry, he ran away. And but he wanted to actually have some privacy so that he could actually worship Lord Jagannath. And so when he arrived there, as soon as he actually saw Lord Jagannath, he became ecstatic and he lost consciousness. And everybody thought he'd left his body. But they fetched Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was an experienced transcendentalist, although he was an impersonalist at that time. And he examined Lord Chaitanya and he couldn't find any signs of life. But then he took a few cotton threads, and he put them in front of his nose and he saw that they were moving. So he could understand that there was life there. So without the existence or the soul within the body, then nothing will happen. And that's why Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya did that. If there had been no breeze, he would have known that there's nothing, the body stopped functioning. So, this is a simple thing for a devotee to understand. So why is it that other people can't understand? Because, they're convinced that material science knows everything. Their, empirical understanding of everything from experiment. But actually, it's not a point of proving. They'll say, prove the existence of the soul. But, we can say, disprove the existence of the soul. We have evidence from Shastra. What evidence do you have? As it says in this particular verse that the energy for the corpuscles to take oxygen from the lungs, the red corpuscles, they absorb oxygen, they become red. The energy to initiate them is coming from the soul, and that's in the region of the heart. And that's where, medical science stops. They know that the heart is actually making everything work. But what is actually giving the energy to the heart? That's something they don't know. But it's actually practical. By practical experiment, we can see the heart's working. What's making it work? We said the soul. They say, I don't know. So they have to disprove the existence of the soul. Anyway, this is one point. It's like, frog in philosophy, frog in the well philosophy, Dr. Frog. They have a limited understanding of just about everything. Its practically zero. Just like a frog in the well, it's got limited understanding of a well which is at most 6 feet across. And they try to understand the Pacific Ocean. And, they start expanding there. Is it twice? Is it 10 times? 100? No, it can't be above 100 times. So this is their situation. So is that real intelligence? So intelligence is described in the Bhagavad Gita as knowing, or knowledge, I should say, which cultivates intelligence, knowing the difference between the body, body and the soul, or the difference between the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Soul, and the individual soul, and the difference between them. And that's it. That's knowledge. Everything else is described in Bhagavad Gita as being ignorance, unless it's connected with that understanding. So they completely wallow in ignorance. So why is that? We can just Prabhupada was once being not interviewed, but asked question. One media man had been asking to visit him for some time, and eventually he got Prabhupada's darshan. He was a really nice person, actually. Prabhupada liked him a lot. But, because he was actually absorbed in the mode of ignorance, Prabhupada was mercifully tried to explain about the nature of the soul, about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And he sort of used the analogy of the car and its driver. And he said, there's a car and there's a driver. He says, the driver is actually needed to make the car work. He says, so which is most important? And he was thinking for some time. He started to chuckle a little bit. He said, he said, what is this? He said, the car. And Prabhupada said, no, listen carefully. And so he explains it in a little bit more detail in a different way. And so he says, so which is most important, the driver or the car? And he said, the car. And Prabhupada, and this happened about 3 times. And he couldn't understand. Why is it that they can't understand? Has anybody got any answers? They don't have jnana chakshusha. They don't have real knowledge. And why don't they have real knowledge? In Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, Edam te natapaskatya, it says that this knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere, not devoted, and not sincere. So actually, what it's saying is we have to be a devotee, or we have to get the mercy of a devotee to understand it. And so Prabhupada said to the devotees who were there at the time when he was interviewing this person, he gave him some moments. He says, give him some prasad. So actually, Prabhupada says this is our process. He says, in the beginning, I never actually spoke philosophy. He says, I just gave prasad and the holy name. Prasad and the holy name. And when, they've had sufficient prasadam and the holy name, then we can speak a little bit of philosophy and they can understand. So, when we're absorbed in all the wrong things, it just covers the intelligence, it covers the knowledge that was in the heart. So we have to lead a way of life which brings us to a mode by which we can understand this science. People in ignorance and passion, they just cannot understand. Even personally myself, when I sometimes read some of Prabhupada's purports, I just don't get it, even now. Occasionally I come across the thing, I think, what does he mean by that? So there's still some passion and ignorance there. So that needs purifying away. Then mode of goodness, they call it. In the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita is just about completed. But then Arjuna wants to make sure that, everything's covered. So he says, what about people who worship according to their own idea without following Shastra? What mode of nature are they in? And Krishna very nicely explains it, but at the end of the explanation says, actually they're not in the mode of ignorance. He says because they're not following Shastra, there's no benefit. And so so he says we have to raise to the mode of goodness. So actually the activities that we perform every day, as in the morning program, they're, we rise early, we're performing the mode of goodness activities, but they can become devotional by, purifying our consciousness through that activity. And then what does Krishna say? To those who, Tesham Satata Yuksnam, Ajitam Priti Purvakam, Dadadi Buddhi Yogam Tam, Yena Mamo Priyante, Bhajitam Priti. When we start to make those activities devotional, then we can develop further. We can come to, or we attempt to make them devotional. So it's a science, and we have to go through a step at a time. In the Bhagavad Gita it says, we need knowledge, in other words. Knowledge gives us vision. Jnana chakshusha, or the vision with knowledge. So where does that come from? What does it talk about knowledge in Bhagavad Gita? It speaks about, in the 18th chapter, about knowledge in different modes again. That knowledge by which one sees the spiritual nature separate in all bodies is in the mode of goodness. So this is seeing the soul. One who sees different living entities according to the body, he just sees the body, in other words. He says this is in the mode of passion. This is also impersonalists are in that mode, so it's explained in that purport. And then knowledge, which is in the mode of ignorance, he just sees the body and the enjoyment of the body, that's all. That's all he's concerned with. Eating, sleeping, working, and defending. So that's the knowledge of the animals. So mode of goodness, this is why it's so important. Mode of goodness means we can actually understand. Anything else on that? It's based on desire as well. If we desire, then Krishna can fulfill. So the earlier part of devotional service is to generate that desire, the desire to actually see Krishna, to associate with Krishna. This is the whole point, is that when we actually want to see the Supreme Soul and associate with him, then if it's sincere, Krishna will actually fulfill that desire. So step by step we're coming to that point. But first of all, we have to understand this simple point. What is the soul? Actually, at the end of life, when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, I was watching one one video, and he's laid down, he doesn't have much strength, and he manages to speak. He says, "We are not these bodies." And don't think this won't happen to you. He was still preaching the same thing right at the end, because this is the most important thing. Otherwise, we'll never be actually able to make progress in devotional service properly. Why? Because Bhayam Dviti Abhinivasetaha Shat. It says that we'll be fearful due to bodily identification. And what is that? Dviti means duality. Seeing ourselves different, separate from Krishna. But as soon as we actually understand this point properly, then we can actually really make an advancement. The Mayavadis. Prabhupada also, when he was doing this verse, he was quoting the Mayavadis. And he was saying that, earlier on in this chapter, 2:12 and 2:13, he particularly deals with this point. And that is that, he explains how everything's coming from Lord Vishnu. And before that verse, he explains that to Arjuna that you're in ignorance, you're a fool. You're placing, all your understanding of what to do or not to do in this situation on bodily identification. Asochan and Vasochastam Pragya Vadam Shabasate Gatasan Agatasan Shah Nano Sochanti Pandisaha. A actual pandit or learned person, he doesn't actually place emphasis on the soul. We're dealing, on the body. So, in that particular verse, Krishna refutes that he's speaking about the body for the subsequent verses. So this is a subsequent verse. And previous to this subsequent verse, in the 12th chapter, he says that Natwevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadita. He says, never was there a time that I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall we ever cease to be. So just think about this conversation. How can it be impersonal? Never was there a time when any of us did not exist. And he's speaking to everybody in their individual identity. So does that mean that we exist in the future, we all become one? Did Krishna say that? When you're speaking to somebody, you make a point of saying that if that was the truth. Is that right? Never was a time when we did not exist. So it's talking about the plurality of the soul again. And then in the next verse, in 12, he said, if Krishna, the Mayavadis may say that the plurality of us being a bit different from one another is only in the, what they call it, the bodily concept of life, in the material concept, conventional concept. And then Prabhupada answers by saying, Krishna's already said that we're not interested in the body in the previous verse in 2:11. He's already said we're not talking about the body, we're talking about the soul. And so he's talking about the duality of the soul in spiritual life. And then he actually says that later on, from verse 13, it talks about the soul cannot be cut. It's one. He says, so if we're all one, how have we become many? So we're eternally, if the soul cannot be cut, we're eternally separate. Does that make sense? So all these things are there for, contemplation. We're an individual, insoluble, unbreakable. We cannot be burnt by a fire, withered by the wind, moistened by water. All these are things that are mentioned before this verse. That we're an eternal individual soul. Prabhupada makes that point over and over again. Yeah, another reason. What's another reason a materialistic person cannot understand the soul? Has anybody got any answers to that?
Yes. So many reasons why they cannot understand, Maharaj.
What's that? Really?
I said there are so many reasons why the materialist cannot understand the existence of the soul, because
Well,
the whole conception is that the body is just the self. So I was born by this mother, and this is me, the body. So
yeah.
cannot.
Well, it says later on in the Gita that some look on the soul as amazing. Think of the soul as amazing. He's described as amazing, and even though he's described, they can't understand him.
It still doesn't understand.
So that's the point I'm making: is why can't you understand what we've said? One thing, ignorance. What's another thing? Is that if they try to understand by these empirical means, by scientific experiment. But in Ishupanishad, it says that we're actually subject to 4 defects. We cannot understand when we have 4 defects. We cheat, we make mistakes, we we're illusioned by situations, and you know, we have imperfect senses. So even if we sincerely want to understand, it's not by the ascending process. We have to understand by the descending process. And therefore, Prabhupada explains in text 19, I think it is, of this verse, and two more verses, and he says in the purport, we cannot, what's the word he uses? We cannot establish the existence of the soul beyond the purview of Shastra. We have to understand it from Shastra. And so unless they actually come to the point of having enough faith to accept Shastra, they'll never know. They'll always be thinking that maybe it's like this, maybe it's like that. And, you know, consciousness, it says it's spread throughout the body through the blood. Is that right? He said in the purport. And so where the blood's not circulating, has anybody sat on their leg for a while and they've tried to get up and they nearly collapsed because the leg's numb? It's got not, you know, the blood's not circulated. It doesn't work. You can't even feel it. So this is proving the point that consciousness is circulated through the blood. So I've got a little story here of how we can understand that. I went on my vacation in England. It's not the best place to go on vacation. It's always cloudy most of the time. But anyway, I tried. And I went to one place. It was a residential house where many people were staying. And one morning when I was taking breakfast, this was before I joined the movement, of course, I saw an old gentleman. He got up. Oh, before breakfast, I saw him marching down to the seafront. And then he came back about an hour and a half later. And somebody told me he goes for a walk every morning down the seafront for about a mile and then a mile back. So, wow, that, you know, he was in his 80s. I thought he's really fit. And so I became a bit curious. And at one point I started speaking to him and said, you go for a walk to keep yourself healthy. I said, you look well on it, you know, it's doing you good. He says, well, that's part of it. He said, there's a reason I do it. He says, I can tell you if I want. I said, yeah, please. So he started saying how I used to be a sergeant. This was in 1970s, actually. And at that time, he was in his 80s. He said, I used to be a sergeant in the First World War. This was in Europe. And my particular service was to take soldiers, a few soldiers behind enemy lines. They call it reconnaissance, I think. And we would spy on them and then report back to the, you know, to the British side or the Allies side. He says, but one day we were behind enemy lines. We were behind enemy lines by 3 miles and we were spotted. So what would you do in that situation, you know? He said immediately they got up and they started running as fast as they could back to their own lines. And they all, you know, there was this 5-bar gate and they all just leaped over it. But then the sergeant, when he got over it, he got some intuition. He looked back and there was this private and he froze. He was so frightened, he just couldn't get over the gate. And so he thought, what to do? And so he quickly ran back and he got hold of him and he pulled him over the gate. He said, run. And he kicked him up the backside, you know. And they both started running then. But by that time, you know, the enemy had come a little closer and they were after them. And all of a sudden he heard this big explosion behind him. And, you know, he felt the draft of it, but it knocked him forward a little bit, but he thought, just keep running, don't look back. He was in samadhi. He knew there's only one thing to aim for, and he was completely fixed on the goal. There was nothing else on his mind. This is the nearest thing to spiritual samadhi you'll ever get. And so he was running and running and running, and then eventually, you know, he was behind his own lines. So then, you know, he started to relax a little bit. then, you know, his consciousness wasn't just on where he wanted to be. It came back into the body. Then he felt something on his leg. It was, you know, his leg was wet. And he looked down, there was just blood everywhere. And he looked at his leg, and half his calf, nearly the bottom part of his leg, had nearly been blown away. And then he started to feel the pain. So what's the, you know, he wasn't conscious of that part of his body. He was conscious of other things. So, you know, consciousness, the soul is different from the body. The consciousness is different. It's when we place our, you know, our meditation on something, on a certain part of the body, then we can actually. So, and the actual doctor, when he came to be, he was put in the medical tent. The doctor said, "Oh, we'll have to amputate your leg." He says, "You're not doing that." He says, "I've just ran 3 miles with that." So they kept it, and that's why he walked, so to keep the strength in it. Anyway, this is a little story, so I hope it helps us to understand this concept. But I just want to say a little bit about today's Madhavendra Puri, his disappearance day. So Madhavendra Puri was very prominent in our line of disciplic succession. He was a grand spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. His disciples were Advaita Acharya, and well, it's said that Nityananda was a disciple, but there's some argument about him being the disciple of Lakshmipati, the spiritual master of Madhavendra Puri. But, you know, anyway, Lord Nityananda always treated Madhavendra Puri, because he was senior to him, as his spiritual master. And then Ishvara Puri was also a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. And so Lord Chaitanya took initiation from Ishvara Puri. But when Lord Chaitanya was traveling in towards Jagannath Puri, he was in Orissa, and he came across one temple called Rimuna, called the Gopinath Temple. And there he recited the story of Madhavendra Puri. How Madhavendra Puri, he was in Vrindavan, and he had a dream where the Gopal deity came and said, "Please rescue me." I mean, you know, when the Muslims invaded, they took the deities and they hid them. So he'd been there for a long time in the forest, covered by dirt. And so the deity appeared to Madhavendra Puri, said, "Please save me. I'm feeling, you know, freezing. I'm dirty. I'm hot in the summer." And so Madhavendra Puri got the villagers, and they all went and they excavated the Gopal deity. And then they started to worship Gopal. Then one day later, he had another dream. And the deity appeared and says, "I'm still hot. I want you to go to Jagannath Puri and get some sandalwood paste and bring back to smear on my body." So Madhavendra Puri, with great difficulty, went all the way to Jagannath Puri. And when he reached the town of Rimuna, we hear about how he, the Gopal, the deity there, Gopinath deity, stole some sweet rice and told the priest to find Madhavendra Puri and give him this sweet rice. Because, you know, Madhavendra Puri was thinking, it would be really nice to actually feed Gopal this sweet rice they're preparing for Gopinath in this temple. And so he was meditating, and then he actually checked himself. He felt guilty that he'd thought about, you know, he thought it'd be nice to taste it to see what it's like for benefit of Gopal. And so the deity actually responded to that by appearing to the priest in a dream and telling him to steal one pot of rice for Madhavendra Puri, and then going into the marketplace where he was taking rest, where he was situated, and giving it to him. And at that time, so then this shows the love of his devotee, how Krishna reciprocates. Madhavendra Puri connected what do you call it, sandalwood paste from Jagannath Puri. And on his way back, the Gopal deity appeared to him and said, just give just this sandalwood to the Gopinath deity. That will be enough. I'm none different from Gopinath. So also at that time when Lord Chaitanya was reciting this story, he also explained about how Madhavendra Puri is the first devotee to give the real mood of our disciplic succession from that time. What is that mood? That service in separation. Because when he was, Madhavendra Puri was lamenting in one part of the Chaitanya Chaitamrita. See if I can find the verse. Here we are. This is called the Kaustuba Mani. It's considered the most precious of all valuable stones. This verse is similarly considered the best poem dealing with the mellows of devotional service. So what is that verse? Aidina Dayadra Nath He, Natura Nath Kadavalo Kashye, Hridayam Twad Aloka Kartaram, Daitya Brahmyati Kim Karamyaham. Aham. O my Lord, O merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved, what shall I do now? So why is he praying like that? He's following the sentiments of Srimati Radharani, who's the dearmost servant of the Lord. And when Lord Krishna left Vrindavan to go to Mathura, he didn't return. So, Radharani felt acute separation from the Lord. But she carried on serving within the mind, always thinking about him. And so she lamented like this. She was all the gopis were lamenting like this. When will we see you again? And so this is the mood of Madhavendra Puri. So this is the mood of Lord Chaitanya, and this is the mood of our ISKCON movement. It changed after Lakshmipati, the spiritual master of Madhavendra Puri. Oh, it didn't change, it included this serving in separation. This service in separation is considered the most elevated form of serving the Lord, even more elevated than serving in union. Because when we're in separation, then actually we more intensely meditate on the object of our love. So this is the great contribution of Madhavendra Puri to our disciplic succession. And this is the mercy that Lord Chaitanya received from Madhavendra Puri. He was actually distributing it. When he was at Rath Yatra, the same mood was there. He was actually at Rath Yatra there. It's the celebration of when the gopis tried to pull Krishna back to Vrindavan, when they met him at Kurukshetra, when there was a lunar eclipse. And Lord Chaitanya, during the Rath Yatra festival, he also exhibited this mood of Madhavendra Puri and Srimati Radharani. He was praying to the Lord with certain words, and nobody could understand him. None of the devotees, what is he praying? And then later, after the Rath Yatra, when Lord Chaitanya went to visit Rupa Goswami in his abode, in his residence, Rupa Goswami was taking his midday shower. And so while Lord Chaitanya was waiting, he noticed in the in the inside there was a parchment, and he took the parchment out of Rupa Goswami's roof and he started reading it. And that particular verse was giving the same sentiments of Lord Chaitanya or Srimati Radharani's feelings towards Krishna. And so this is why Rupa Goswami is called the Ras Acharya. He knows the ras that Lord Chaitanya was exhibiting, what Madhavendra Puri was exhibiting, and what Srimati Radharani was exhibiting. So therefore we considered followers in the path of Rupa Goswami, or Rupanugas in other words. Sri Madhavendra Puri ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Gaura Premanandi.
Haribo. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful class.
If there's anybody got any questions, you're welcome. If not, that's okay also. And or any comments.
So devotees, I have not seen any hands up. Meanwhile, Maharaj, while you were discussing about the soul earlier on the topic of the chapter 217, I was just contemplating. Srila Prabhupada, when he came to the West, when he started the ISKCON movement, most Westerners have no understanding of knowledge of the soul. And somehow the Srila Prabhupada was somehow able to introduce the philosophy of the body not being the self. And he was able to attract the followers. In our day-to-day preaching activities, sometimes the tendency is there to always want to start because you're not, the body is said to be the ABC of spiritual knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada was different. He is empowered. He has a unique empowerment. But we've seen that when you try to speak that ABC knowledge of Krishna consciousness, the knowledge of the soul, when you meet someone new, it's always, most of the time, repulsive from the other hand. What do you think could be the approach to introducing?
And they don't understand. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
the knowledge of the soul is said to be the ABC of spiritual life. So I'm saying that in the beginning, when you meet someone new and you try to introduce this subject matter, most of the time it is very difficult to understand for them.
yeah.
So
Well,
my question is, how do one, can you give an explanation how one approaches this subject matter to a new person who is new completely to Krishna consciousness?
Well, you know, I was telling about the interviewer who was trying to give the the example of the car and the driver. Eventually, Prabhupada was having a difficult time, and so he told them to just give him some prasadam. You know, and because if we take prasadam, then we get purified. If we hear the holy name, we get purified, and then it's possible. So this is our great secret weapon. We just distribute prasadam, and then people's intelligence is able to, you know, understand this concept. It's ultimately that's why I was saying that, you know, don't try and give too much. If any philosophy, Prabhupada said, don't give philosophy in the beginning because you won't succeed. But if you actually allow them to become a little bit more purified, then you can explain. Then they can digest it. I gave the example even sometimes when I read some Prabhupada reports, you know, it's like I can't quite get my head around some things that Prabhupada says until, you know, after some time. So maybe that's a result of my past conditioning also. So that's the thing, is that, you know, Prashadam's there for a purpose. Prabhupada emphasized Prashadam so much in the beginning. When Hari Sori was Prabhupada's servant for about 18 months in 1976 and the beginning of 77. And when they were Bhaktivedanta Manor in England, the Watford Temple in London, Hari Sori invited his relatives to come to the temple and see the deities. And so he asked Prabhupada if for that day he could be excused from his service. And Prabhupada said, yes, no problem. Just get somebody to fill in. So, Hari Sori received his family, and unfortunately he hadn't arranged prashadam. So he went and asked if there's any prashadam, and said it's all gone. And so he couldn't give them prashadam. So he showed them round and everything, and then eventually they left. And when Prabhupada came back, Prabhupada said, so how did the visit go? He says, oh, they liked it very much, Prabhupada. They were very favourable, and he was telling him all the details. He said, did he take prashadam? He said, well, sorry, Prabhupada, they didn't, because there was no lecture. Prabhupada went, oh. And Hari Sori says it seems like Prabhupada was saying, what's the point then? Anyway, they got purified, but his Prabhupada really emphasized everybody who visited him to take prashadam. And so we shouldn't underestimate it. We take it for granted. But it's part of the process.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. I think I can attest to this. When I joined Krishna consciousness newly, I've been involved in different levels of religious activities, Muslim, Christian. But when I took to Krishna consciousness, my dad could not take it in any way. And he even went as far as denounced me as his son. He said, you're no longer my son, and all of that. And there was one festival, I sent some prasadam, and I didn't have anything to do with him. I don't see him. He doesn't want to see me. But I sent through one of my brother, and they took the prasad. But then after almost about a year after, then he called me. And then he said, I wanted to speak with you again about what you just taken to. And we started discussing. And then he said, well, I don't understand these things, but I cannot comprehend it. He said, but it's anyway, you're still my son. And even though I renounced you in the first place, but you can visit me once in a while. So I took that opportunity. I gave him some prasadam. Actually, I gave him my water, because before then, even though I was born a Christian, I was a Muslim. I became a Christian. So he used to like when I take water purified from the church to him. So I took my water this time. So I gave him some my water, and he did a lot of magic on him. He ended up requesting to come to the temple. He stayed in the temple with me for about a week. So I think the prasadam is really very powerful. I can attest to that.
Yeah, definitely. It works.
But Maharaj, for those whom we meet online, preaching through social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, who does not have the opportunity to take prasadam, so what's the means of making them getting purified? Because now they don't have opportunity. Maybe sometimes they are even in another country, some other continent, but you met them as a friend, and then you're trying to make them Krishna conscious, but the background is so deep that they really don't want to take. But they like you as an individual person, you talk with them. So how do you approach such persons?
What you mean the next stage, when they're friendly but they don't want to take up?
I'm talking about meeting someone on Facebook, for an example, just as a friend. We chat on Facebook, then we start discussing about personal things. Okay, I'm a Krishna conscious person, you're Christian. Then we start talking. They will try to preach Krishna consciousness to him. Some who has enough punya karma, they take it immediately. But there are some people who really cannot take the philosophy, but they attracted to you as a person, but they can't take the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. They argue. I've met few friends like that who we met on Facebook, but they never want to get interested in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. They can't accept it.
Yeah, I mean, there's different levels. People are at different levels according to their past karma. So some are not ready, and we have to accept that and just remain favorable towards them and encourage them. Make friends. First thing is to make friends, isn't it? If we make friends, then we have a platform for actually going further. So we can't push. It's, you know, even Krishna doesn't push. It's our free will. So we have to appreciate that and just act in such a way that they'll be attracted. That's the main thing. And if we can get prasadam to them, that's the other way as well. And if we're online, if they live near a temple, we can give them the address, ask them to visit, and they'll get prasadam. But anyway, Krishna's in the heart. You know, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati. He's directing the wanderings of everybody. So it's the individual's desire. We can only present the opportunity. That's all. And we have to be detached enough to actually do that. And also, you know, and when Krishna's also helping from within. So, you know, the preaching means to actually allow a person or give the opportunity for a person to actually come up a level. So we have to be careful that at that level, we don't become dissatisfied that they're not making progress according to our calculations. Otherwise, they may go down a level. So we have to make sure we don't disturb where they're at. And then there's a chance, you know, we're not the only ones. You know, they'll have other opportunities if we make them favourable, or, you know, act in a favourable way at least.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you.
I do not see any hands up, and there's no question in the chat room, so I want to assume that there is no question.
Yeah. Everybody's. Yeah.
I think most of the devotees are just listening to the class. They're multitasking, I guess. And so, but in any case, we thank you so much, Maharaj, for coming on the platform. And we hope to see you soon again on this platform.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So I will ask all of the devotees who are online here to please kindly unmute themselves. Let us chant a powerful one, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, to appreciate Maharaj for this wonderful class.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare Rama, Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Holiness Dayananda Maharaj ki
Jai.
jai.
Jai. Thank you very much, Swamiji.
Prabhupada ki
We are
jai.
very grateful.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
darling. Honestly, does not come.